Bem, eu estou bastante feliz porque me deram a honra de estar na nossa última mesa, encerramento aqui, né, do nosso evento, o segundo encontro, né, e a gente poder, né, na verdade, segundo o Simpósio Internacional, para a gente estar falando sobre formação.
Awesome. Very
E
happy
ao
to be
lado
here
de
at the symposium to talk about formation alongside people that are so kind. With me, there are João Paulo Navega Hogue, is doing his master, specialist in Libras, neuropsychopedagogy and inclusive education, and director of Navega Leal Pedagogic Consultory and member of JPIX of UMESP. In my right side, we have Warley dos Santos. He's master and doctor in studies of translation of Federal University of Santa Catarina, researcher of the Intertrads group. Oh, he's more important than I imagine. Executive Director of Academy Trados and member of the pedagogical part of Febrapils. This table originally was from yesterday, but we are finishing with it because of its importance and especially for today, so we can complement all the subjects that was discussed, and so we can think about the formation and the studying of everyone, thinking about the services of the guide interpretation. So João Paulo, you can begin. Okay, so I think I'm going to let Warley speak first because he will give us the foundations of everything that I want to speak later on, because we're going to present the theory of competences. So Warley can begin and then I complement with my speech, okay? Okay, thank you, João. Thank you, Professor Shirley. For me, it's an honor to be here in this last meeting, finishing this event, a very important event where we discuss a series of aspects about the attending of people with deafblind people. And that is important to understand the formation of this professional that will guarantee the access of everything of the world for the deafblind people. The title of my speech is what I used to discuss in my doctorate and now in my postdoctorate. It's the innovation and formation of guide interpreters in the pair Libras Portuguese and contribution of theory of competence. Today afternoon, I presented a little part of it in my postdoctoral studies alongside Gustavo Costa, and it was possible to make an evaluation of the course offered by AHIMSA for the formation of guide interpreters. And thinking of it with the model of competences, theory of competences, that is developed by Professor Albi from University of Barcelona. On the final of the 20th century, we start getting some researches that explore this formation, the challenges of acting with different kinds of communication, and little by little they are consolidating themselves. One of these reflects is the realization of this event, because the north of this event is working with deaf-blind people and the guide interpreters. A big contribution to this area, and people can maybe find odd, but the studies of translation, which is my area, my theoretical framework, alongside the education event, is that who discuss the formation of this process is the intersection of studies of translation and education, because translation is the activity, the main activity, and the goal is for education. We also talked about legislation. Nildo told some things about that now talk about the guide interpreter in the same role as the interpreter, the translator and interpreter. And there are those three kinds of activity, which are different than the interpreter and the guide interpreter. So each one of this acting of this works need a specific permission, and this has an unlimited offer. We identified it in a work me and Gustavo developed. We're now starting to write this work. Soon you have access to it. As I said, it's a part of my doctorate and my postdoctorate studies. I developed a gamified course thinking about the formation of translator, and now I'm applying this course. I have 90 students in 9 federal university, 10 each, that are doing this course, and I'm collecting data. So this methodology, the gamification through the audiovisual formation, can be applied in the future, and using this innovative practice. So when we ask anyone, what makes you be a guide interpreter? Many times this question is hard to be answered because most of the colleagues were studied and learned how to be a guide interpreter with experiences. Many learned from practice how to be guide interpreters, and because of this empirical knowledge, this was brought to his everyday acting, his job, and now I think our main challenge is to understand everything and write everything about what it takes to be a guide interpreter. One of the things is competence, knowledge, which is knowledge, skills, and attitude. The knowledge would be how does it work, what are the possibilities of interaction. The skill is know how to do it. Is a very practical approach. There are a series of knowledge that are involved with the ability of doing, and the attitude of being this professional. When I have all of this, there is all of these items, then I have a professional that is competent to do that role. Based on Yanis and Villardon, they understand that competence is a group of knowledge, skills, and attitudes that are necessary to make a given occupation and the capacity to mobilize and apply those resources in a given environment to produce a given result. So they understand, and we understand, that the guide interpreter has to be competent so they can have the expected results. But for us to get to this formation that I are understood as ideal, we have to think about the professional profile. This is a demand that I've been working on it alongside Professor Elaine, since her thesis is also a formative directive for people that want to be guide interpreter. The first thing is, who is the guide interpreter in Brazil? We still don't have this data. How does the guide interpreters in Brazil learn how to be this profession, how to play this part? Because most of the times they act as guide interpreter, but they don't have a formal education, and most of the times they also work in a different way, because each deafblind person has a different way of communicating. Then this kind of professional usually have to adapt themselves to be able to communicate with its public. So I think that's something we still need to map and understand everything that is necessary to be a part of this professional formation, the base formation. We don't have an answer, so we need to design it or understand it, map all the function, the tasks, and given this information, we will then transform that in competences. When we transform it in competences, then there is a possibility to make a curricular design, and after that, we can propose a formation that is really helpful and useful. Then there is the perspective of formation by competencies. When I define it, I know what a guide interpreter has to do. Then I will transform this in competencies, and I transform these competencies in different content that has to be taught in the formation courses. Every professor have to answer this question. At the end of my course, my student will be able to, that's the main question that we have to answer at the end of each content or each part of the course. For instance, to be able to be a guide interpreter using different kinds of communication, augmented speech or Libras, Brazilian Sign Language in a reduced range of view, or tactile Libras or whatever. This kind of understanding helps us to know the north of everything that we are going to do. We have to understand what kind of competence they need to develop in order to be a good professional. We have to think about the practical activities and everything that they need to do during their professional life. So what's the big difference between an interpreter and a guide interpreter? Many times I hear this discourse of, oh, I'm an interpreter. Automatically, I can be a guide interpreter. No, that's not how things work. One thing is one thing, other thing is other thing. We can mix those things. I have to think about the formation of this professional by understanding that the process of guide interpreting uses visible phenomena. But when we are detailing this, we are able to understand how complex the interpretation is. I don't know if you stop to think about what happened in our head in the moment we are interpreting. What kind of miracle knowledge allows us to translate images or sound waves in visual images when we are translating to Libras, or when we can transform visual elements in sound waves when we are doing from Libras to Portuguese, for instance. That's extremely complex. I dream that one day the Haptic committee can allow me to put interpreters in a PET scan to try to understand what happens in our brain. So far, they think that I'm going to kill someone, but that's not the goal. The goal is to understand how does our brain process this knowledge, this specialized knowledge that differentiate the one who is translator, then interpreter, and guide interpreter. When we're dealing with it, we're dealing with modalities, with language modalities. And what does that mean? That it means that every language has a property of production and reception. For instance, Portuguese, it's produced not by our vocal cords, but by the air that passes through the vocal cords, and it resounds in our mouth and produces a sound. So it's a language of vocal production. And the reception of this is our hearing, our ear. But it presents itself in different ways. I can use it in different ways. I can use it by the written form, or I can use it in the non-written form, which is oral modality. But there is a third possibility of the use of language, which is the guide interpreter, where the guide interpreter acts. The interpreter in the oral, then I can have a translator for the written, but I can also have this language being perceived through tactile aspects. That's when tactile Libras or Tadoma or other possibilities, linguistic possibilities, and translator possibilities that make the interpreter make this language be perceived in a different way.
So during this event, we have been discussing the tactile methodology as the semiotics in the previous open table. This is possible that during the interpretation Patrick's, we are considering all these aspects. And we have the sign language that we call gesture, those movements. Sometimes it may sound, it's not well understood this, but it's the measure of the smaller unit of producing and being visually perceptive, and it can also written, even though we don't have a socially accepted, but it's possible to be written as well. And the sign language can be also orally, as you were doing a living speech. And also we have the tactile modality. So we have the interpreter, the translator, and the guide interpreter. So texts that are being produced in orally, written, or bodily through the skin. So the future perspectives is the limitation we want to do. We define the profile of this guide interpreter. What do they do? What are their functions and their tasks? So according to these aspects, we turn this into competence and in didactic content to be taught. And training in technical level, that we can study these institutions, and also the different aspects of the training and the qualification of the guide interpreters. Finally, this is my contact. So if you want to email me, or you want to develop this topic, and I give the floor back to Professor Shili. So now we're going to accomplish this topic, and then we're going to finish with tasks. I asked Warley because he was my teacher, and so how can we mention them before? So it's an honor being here with Warley and Professor Shirley, because he was one of my masters, and Shirley is a great reference in deaf and blindness in Brazil. And so it's amazing to be in a table with her. And now what I'm explaining is a small contribution comparing to everything we have seen in those 2 days. So I have a proposition on deaf and blindness, focus on tactile libras and social haptic communication. It goes on the same direction that Professor Wiley said, but I want to give you some context before. First, I offered a training with Moreno Libras from Belo Horizonte City. We offered this training because of the demand, the needs, because it was hard to have training. We have one here nowadays. The article that Gustavo Costa and Warley are writing, it shows the competencies. It is offered by Ahimsa with Shirley, that is the director of Ahimsa. So the training they offer contains this content, but it is in São Paulo state and other states of Brazil. Sometimes it's very hard to be here to do this training. So the first topic is how people don't understand the deaf and blind person. And again, it goes according to Professor Warley, says if you are Libras interpreter, you don't know, you are a guide interpreter, and that's not like that. You have been here all day, you have noticed this is different. So I cannot be a guide interpreter. So Eleni says on her dissertation, and especially on her thesis, about the training that she offers during the pandemic years. It was online and also live, and she wanted to, I'm looking here because she's not in front of me, but she proposes a training online, and based on the course that she offers on her training, I go with my research in the same direction. So my main objective is not turn people into guide interpreters. My initial goal is, before even talking about guide interpreter, we have to talk about the TGSP, that is Eleni's concept to talk about the guide interpreter. So I do not intend to give them the whole base, but I want them to understand the main aspects and offer something that can work ethically and also work with mobility and orientation as an open door a starting point. And I think what is special of this course is that we can offer this for the whole country remotely, because it was possible to offer it on her thesis, and now we're doing it again. So the structure of the training we created, it was remotely. The requirement we asked was to be at least at intermediate level of Libras. We did not took they signing up for that because we had to talk about deaf and blindness, but we wanted to talk about the two types of communication that a guide interpreter could use. So social haptics communication and Brazilian Sign Language tactile modality. So we wanted to use the gesture visual to the haptic. So they needed to be bilingual. They need to know Brazilian Sign Language before, and after having 150 minutes, my students had to stand me for hours, 2 hours, and it was for 3 months. It's a short term training, so it's initial training. And as Wiley said, we are thinking on a longer training course for this professional. As it is a long distance course, we have some barriers, some limitation, and it would take some strategies for them to train. So they have to make videos, have to record videos to practice the proposition that based on Professor Eleni's activities, and also talking to Gustavo and Wiley. Ahimsa would give us examples on activities that we could work with, and also talking to Eleni to develop the ability of our interpreters, and also a final evaluation to test their knowledge by the end of the course. This is the structure. So in the first class, I talked about who is the deaf and blind person. It doesn't seem so complex, but sometimes we take a whole day to explain it, and there are many doubts, and Claudia Sofia's speech really shows us that someone that see Claudia Sofia, her speaking, and they say, maybe they have questions about her identity. So people don't really know a lot about deaf and blind people. They don't understand these people and this diversity. So this was our main focus in our course. Also, who is the mediator, the instructor mediator? So Shirley and I, we were talking about that topic. So Ahimsa is the only one that offers this. Also, who is the guide interpreter and their attributions, their responsibilities. Then I go to, I make it a bit biased. I know this word is sometimes is negative, but I change the route to tactile Libras, social haptic, or social haptic communication. I have to mention my advisor. It would be complicated if I didn't, but she explains the difference between haptic communication and social haptic communication, which is a tool, and the other is more a connection with people. As Russ said before, nothing can replace touch, human touch. And Marley talked about the technical procedures of tactile Libras and social haptic communication with Professor Wiley. It was 2.5 hours. They loved it. I was sad because mine was the next class, and I thought, they're not gonna like it. And the last one was linguistic perspective from social haptic communication. Professor Elaine teaching, and then luckily it was the last time because I would not be able to go after her. And this is the cover of her that she created for her material during her thesis, and I used for my classes too, this folder. As it has worked before in her thesis, we would try to do it again. Also, the material that we have used, I want to show the covers of the books, and people, they remember it better. They don't remember the name, but they remember the cover, so I use Laine's material. Also, the two books of Professor Shirley and Fernanda. They're honoring us with her present too, and Fernanda was here with us yesterday. And Inclusion Memories, we have raffled one here, and was our research group who wrote it. There's a chapter and an article in I am promoting myself right now, but it's fine. I have to do a bit of merchandising of myself, and I use this in my class too. The narrative research is the second volume, and I talk about the technical procedures applied to guide interpretation. A case study that I present in this book about narrative research, that I tell an experience with a deaf and blind person in the guide interpretation experience, and another book with Katia, Elio Fonseca, and Biaknuto and Carlos, and also the book on deaf and blindness born deaf and blind. So this course, this training was created for interpreters, Libras interpreters, to help them to work with guide interpretation. So answering Professor Wiley, our intention was to help them to be able to work with deaf and blind people, their competences and their abilities, so they could work as a guide interpreter. So this was our main goal. I want to offer again, so I'm selling myself again. So follow me on my social network. I have to promote myself again. And to finish, this morning we presented the short-term training. So all these trainings are meant to provoke our students. They do not give everything you need, but they want them to start studying and move ahead. So Wiley's proposition with Elaine and with Shirley at the HINSA, we want to create a technical course, and maybe in the future a post-graduation focus in deaf and blindness, talking about the guide interpreters training. This is our main goal, and I thought it was a very important roundtable right now, because Wiley talks about the competences, and I know if I talk about this, and I want Wiley to evaluate it after, of course, and how we bring these abilities and attitudes for our training. We talked a lot about tea. So interpreter has to drink tea because tea is the metaphor for attitude, ability, and knowledge. They cannot go to marketplace without that. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions? Do you want to comment something? When are you going to have spots for the new training? Next year, in the beginning of next year, possibly on vacation. Oh, only remotely? Yes. Shirley saying yes, this is very important. Anything else? We're anxious to hear you, Shirley. Shirley saying, yes, we were sitting here and I was elaborating a lot of things in my mind as I was listening to you. So Elaine, I, Warley, and João were talking before.
So we were thinking, and we were representing the Grupo Brasil and Ahimsa and all the things about deaf blindness, guide interpreting. We always discuss that. So we thought about that, and to finish this table, we are going to make one thing that we are going to elaborate, but we are going to propose a formation course, a technical formation course with Ahimsa, Grupo Brasil, and Methodist University, and the Federal University of Minas Gerais too, and the work of João, so we can think about this really important formation of the guide interpreter. Since the first years of education and the last years too. But we're going to think about it, we're going to sit, elaborate, and then see the possibilities of if this course is or is not going to be good for the deafblind community, and that this could be something for the whole country, this technical course formation. That's something we really want to. Do you have any questions? Yes, I would like to know, for both of you, the formation on the technical course or the professional course as the deaf guide interpreter, is it possible to be a deaf guide interpreter? Do you think that is there any space for deaf people to work in this kind of profession? I'm sorry, I almost responded. Yes, yes. And I'm going to quote a deaf interpreter of International Sign Language, which is João Gabriel Duarte Ferreira. He just finished it, and in his research, he asked himself, does deaf can be an interpreter, can be a guide interpreter? By quoting him, I'd say that the deaf can do whatever he wants to. If you want to be a guide interpreter, yes, he'll have the necessary information to act as a guide interpreter. So it can offer a quality service that attends the necessity of all the deafblind people that needs him. I don't think there is any kind of restriction in this course. We are going to privilege the professional formation, not hearing only, but everyone. And we hope that we can qualify everyone so that the deafblind community can have access to this kind of service in a more qualified way. Yeah, and I want to complement that we already launched the formation some years ago, and we worked with two deaf people, especially to work on the middle schools that are local for kids. And that's super important because when we have deafblind people in these schools, it's a very nice role model to be there. And we did that. At that time, we had a partnership with USP, the University of São Paulo. It was 180 hours, and we were able to do in a way that two deafs were able to do this course and work in municipal schools, city schools, working with kids. Today, they are still working with that inside this city schools and with very positive results for the deaf-blind students that are at their care. Especially in the case of congenital deaf-blind, they might need to have a different approach in getting language. So yes, I still think it's super possible, but we have to understand that when we talk about guide interpreting and for the deafblind people, as I said, it's a super different and non-homogeneous group. So we will have different kinds and different profiles of professionals that will be able to act with tactile libras or other kinds of communication. One will act focused on Tadoma, other will act focused on other thing. So we have this perspective. There is no stopping, there is no barriers for deafblind people to be there as long as it have the proper teaching process. Okay, so we're finishing. I really hope that some people here can do this course, not only here, but all over the country and everyone virtually. And we really hope that this formation course can happen all over the country. I will have another question. I'm sorry, I'm not translating, but I'm not being able to hear what the person is asking. He's saying both finalities, but we have to understand that when we talk about distance, we have some limitations, but trying to beat this, I chose to have a video recording and then send the feedback of analysis of all the videos that would produce. Since it's the idea of initial formation, and I didn't say before in my presentation, but the idea is because we have a lot of people wanting to learn more about tactile libras and social haptic communications, and that's why we had several people wanting to do that, this starting information. And that's starting, only beginning, a beginner's formation. And we had students from all over the country. You have people from like Amazonas state, which is inside the Amazon forest. They had to get a boat and take some hours. When the class was starting, they were getting to their house. So I think that to reach all those people that are so far away in our big country, the best way was to record it. There's only one university here in Brazil that have the deaf blindness in Brazil, which is UFES, Federal University of Espírito Santo state. And I think that our first worry is to make a long distance kind of course. And our idea is to make a course that we have moments that are online and distant, but there are also moments with activities to do at home. But we are still studying this possibility, because when we put this possibility to have the classes presentially, we end up limiting because not everyone can be present. We suffer a little bit because the places far away, they don't really get the permissions. They don't get there. We can't reach them. And the students that are considered intermediary in the regions are not really intermediate. They are like beginners. So you still have a bad formation for Libras, and for guide interpreting is still worse. So the idea is to broaden this lack, because interpretation starts in the head, not in the hands. So our idea is to make the student understand and then start with the practice. I just want to complement your answer, please. Those are initiatives, and any initiatives have choices, and all choices have positive and negative ways. If we understand that we have to make a presential, not everyone can be in the same spot or with the teacher at that moment. For instance, how many of us can be here at São Paulo to make a course at Ahimsa? So the presential course has its limitations, but the distance too. We can reach the farthest place from Brazil. Brazil is a giant country. We have we are almost a continent in continental proportions. But when with initiatives like this, we can make a continuous formation. It's not because I did the João's course. Oh, I am a guide interpreter. No, we have to make deeper formations and in a continuous way. You have to participate in events like this. You have to talk with different professionals. You need to read books. You need to find deafblind people. You need to keep studying. So this formation will be improved as years go by, but it's an initiative. It doesn't resolve everything that is necessary, but it's opening paths. And the idea is for that to grow. That's why we are opening to a technical course so we can take it to everyone. And we know that it will have limitations, but I hope that we answered everything. Yeah, I think that everything that we've seen in this Congress, the perspective, we have other people from other university that we can think about being a partner to be here. That's a way of getting to different places. I think that that's something real important, but that's a starting movement to think about a course, a technical course. I think it's really possible. We sit here and I told the boys that we discuss about the formation of the guide interpreter, and sometimes we see that the person did the course, it's dedicated, but it still needs some time. So we have several courses that we can say, well, you have to do that to be better and to eventually have the competence necessary, the autonomy and professional ethic part to be a good professional. So we expect that this course will be able to handle everything that we want, so we can get to a better place. We really want to thank you, everyone that are here with us, presentially or online. Thank all the interpreters, Portuguese, Libras, English, Spanish, and Chilean Sign Language, Tadoma and Tactile Libras, the guide interpreters. We have several modalities. We also want to thank the Methodist University, Warley, that did all the infrastructure work, João too. I think that for everyone that really believe that this research group want to make a difference in the research context and to get even more knowledge and improve our work. Anything else, Warley, Elaine? No, I just ask to keep checking the group in the social media is at Japixk. The group is growing with other partnerships, and we will eventually go back to the third edition of this event. That's it. Bye-bye.